A young kid is playing by himself on the beach. Suddenly, he spots a sports helmet lying near a classroom. The helmet is covered in rows of large holes, and right on top sits an action camera. Driven by curiosity, the kid turns the camera on and instantly freezes in fear. Recorded on it is a nightmare, a massive great white shark tearing a man apart. Terrified, the boy bolts from the scene. Behind him, a shattered surfboard buried halfway in the sand stands as the silent witness to the man's gruesome end. But not too far away, out in the middle of the ocean, someone was still alive on a signal buoy, fighting their final battle against that bloodthirsty shark. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into the incredible thriller, The Shallows. It's widely considered one of the best shark movies ever made. Simply put, this movie is a heart-pounding, adrenaline-fueled ride. When a beautiful young woman finds herself alone against a massive hungry shark, who makes it out alive? The story kicks off with a surfing trip. A red Chevy pickup truck winds through a tropical rainforest. The destination? A mysterious, semi-deserted island. Only about 300 people live here. A young woman named Nancy is in the truck with a local guide. Nancy tells him this beach was her mother's favorite spot. Back when her mom was healthy, she spent a lot of time here. Now that her mother has passed away from cancer, Nancy has traveled here, following her mom's footsteps to find some peace of mind. Of course, Nancy isn't stupid enough to come to a remote place like this entirely alone. The plan was for her best friend to come along, but her friend drank way too much the night before and is now stuck in bed with a massive hangover. She bailed at the last minute. Nancy's pretty annoyed and mumbles her frustrations, but the guide doesn't speak English, and Nancy's Spanish is so bad that communication is basically impossible. Exhausted and frustrated, Nancy finally reaches the beach. One look at the scenery and Nancy's mood instantly flips. The turquoise water and the cool sea breeze are exactly what she needed. When the guide unloads her surfboard, Nancy tries to pay him, but the man refuses to take a single dime. Turns out he wasn't a professional guide. He was just a kind local who gave Nancy a lift on his way home. Despite the language barrier, it was a heartwarming gesture. The man gestures, asking how she'll get back. Nancy jokes that she'll just take an Uber, even though the guy has no clue what Uber is. Either way, Nancy thanks him and says goodbye. With only a few hours of daylight left, Nancy needs to hit the waves fast. She strips off her shirt and her favorite denim shorts, revealing a toned physique, and heads toward the water. She sets up her gear and fastens the leash to her leg. The leash keeps the board attached so she doesn't lose it in a big wave or get injured. Sometimes the ocean is as calm as a mirror. Other times, it swallows you whole with massive swells. Nancy's luck isn't great at first. As soon as she hits the water, she gets caught in a heavy rip current, but she's an expert. She dives under at just the right time to dodge the first hit. Still, the constant diving starts to wear her out. When the next big set comes, she nails a perfect turn. After a while, the ocean calms down and Nancy runs into two local surfers. Since they speak English, Nancy asks them about the conditions. They warn her to steer clear of the rocky reef zones. Since the tide is in, the rocks are hidden, and surfing there is a recipe for a serious injury. They also warn her about the low tide because the area is packed with fire coral that stings like a jellyfish and burns like crazy. The two guys invite Nancy to surf with them. They joke that the waves might be too big for an American girl to handle. That pushes Nancy's buttons, and she decides to show them what she's got. Nancy stands up on a wave and starts showing off her skills. The locals aren't backing down either, and they all start pushing each other to go bigger. For a moment, Nancy forgets all her pain and gets lost in the rush of the game. A bit later, Nancy starts to feel tired and heads to the shore for a snack. While eating an apple and taking in the view, thoughts of her late mother creep back in. Her mother spent her whole life looking after the family, first in the kitchen, then in a hospital bed. But once upon a time, she was a free-spirited surfer too. Nancy video calls her sister to show her the scenery. The necklace Nancy is wearing, once her mother's, is a reminder that her mom's spirit is still with her. Mid-conversation, her dad pops onto the screen and starts grilling her about why she dropped out of medical school. She worked so hard to get in, and he thinks quitting now is a huge mistake. Nancy always dreamed of healing people, but after watching her mother's brutal battle with cancer, she realized how limited doctors actually are. They couldn't save her, they just put her through the agony of chemo. To Nancy, when it comes to the big stuff, doctors are just messengers of death. She knows her dad means well, but she doesn't want to talk about these painful memories anymore, so she cuts the call short. Nancy pulls her gear back on and dives into the ocean. She wants to exhaust herself so much that the physical toll drowns out the pain of losing her mom. The sun is setting, painting everything in gold. As the two locals head back, they warn Nancy that the ocean is dangerous at night and tell her to head in. Nancy thanks them, but decides to stay for just a bit longer. The guys head to shore, but Nancy senses something is off. She looks around and notices a flock of seagulls all flying in one direction. She squints at something massive floating in the distance. Right then, something moves fast under the surface, heading straight for her. She panics at first, but it's just a pod of dolphins. Nancy smiles at them, but she doesn't realize that dolphins are smart. When they sense danger, they're the first to bail. Seconds later, the dolphins vanish. Suddenly, Nancy catches the stench of rotting meat. She spots a massive whale carcass floating nearby, with hundreds of seagulls tearing at it. Suddenly, the whale's body jerks, like something underneath is pulling it down. The birds scatter in fear, and one slams into Nancy, knocking her into the water. That's when it hits her. She knows why the dolphins ran. If even dolphins are running, whatever is down there is no ordinary shark. Nancy desperately tries to get back to shore. A big wave helps her out, but the shark is lightning fast and slams into her board with massive force. Nancy is thrown underwater and hits the rocks. Luckily, her board hits the rocks first, shielding her from the direct impact, but her leash snaps. Nancy struggles to the surface and reaches for her board. Right then, the shark clamps its jaws onto Nancy's leg and drags her under. It's a bone-chilling sight. The shark's grip is incredibly powerful, but great whites usually start with a test bite to see what they've caught. They don't usually hunt humans for food because we don't have enough fat, so the shark lets go and circles back to watch her. Nancy is bleeding out fast. If she had swam straight for the beach, she might have made it. Instead, she makes a desperate move and climbs onto the whale carcass. The shark thinks she's trying to steal its meal and gets even more aggressive. Nancy scrambles onto the whale's back, gasping for air. She looks at her mangled leg and nearly loses it. She quickly ties her leash around the wound like a tourniquet to stop the bleeding. It was a moment of pure agony. A little later, she sees the two surfers driving away in their truck. Nancy screams for help, but the beach is way too far. Between the distance and the engine noise, they can't hear a thing. Nancy is devastated, but she doesn't give up. The shark starts biting the whale and dragging it into deeper water. Nancy spots a signal buoy in the distance, which is much safer than a slippery whale carcass, but it's too far away. Then she notices a small rocky reef that's just breaking the surface because of the tide. Risking everything, Nancy swims for the rocks. As soon as she reaches it, she's hit with a surge of pain. She stepped right onto fire coral. Thousands of tiny needles sink into her foot. This coral is also bad for the shark's skin, so the predator keeps its distance and circles the rock. Nancy is completely drained. The pain from her leg is making her go numb. When the salt water hits the open wound, she doubles over in agony. She notices that her leg is losing circulation because the tourniquet is too tight. If she leaves it like that, she could lose the leg for good. She loosens the tie, and the rush of blood brings back the excruciating pain. Nancy rips off her sleeve and uses it as a bandage to manage the bleeding while keeping the blood flowing. Night falls. Nancy tries to get some sleep, but a swarm of crabs start crawling all over her. One crab crawls right onto her wound, and in a fit of pain and rage, she crushes it. She hasn't eaten in hours and has zero energy left. Desperate to survive, she tries to eat the raw crab, but the taste is so revolting she gags. A seagull sits nearby, watching her struggle. Nancy takes a moment to try and steady her mind. She has to figure out a way out of this nightmare. The whale carcass is still floating nearby, and Nancy knows that monster shark is still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for her to slip up.
Nancy looks at the shore, completely desperate. Suddenly, she spots her surfboard floating in the water, not too far away. She knows the tide is about to come in, and once it does, this tiny rock island will be completely submerged. She's out of time. She has to risk everything to get that board back. Nancy slides into the water, moving as slowly and quietly as possible to avoid tipping off the shark. But she forgot one thing. A great white sense of smell for blood is legendary. Since Nancy is already bleeding, the shark picks up her scent the second she hits the water. Sensing the predator closing in, Nancy scrambles back onto the rocks just in time. The effort causes her wound to rip open again, and the blood starts pouring out. Feeling hopeless, Nancy stares at the beach and suddenly spots a man walking along the shore. A flicker of hope returns, and she screams for help, but the guy is just a drunk scavenger. He hears her shouting, but instead of helping, he just waves back, completely clueless. Nancy tries to gesture for him to grab the phone from her bag and call for help. Instead, the man decides to rob her, taking her cash and her phone. He even spots the surfboard floating in the water and gets greedy. Nancy screams at him, trying to warn him, but the guy ignores him and dives in to grab the board. Big mistake. The shark hits him from below without warning, snapping him in half. The shark didn't even kill him for food. It killed him because it doesn't tolerate anyone else in its territory. The afternoon drags on, and the scorching sun is taking a brutal toll on Nancy. High tide is only 6 hours away. Just as Nancy is about to pass out from the heat, she sees the two local surfers from earlier returning to the water. She screams at the top of her lungs to warn them, but it's too late. The guys realize she's in trouble and split up. One heads for the shore to get help. The other paddles towards her. Nancy tries to tell them to stop, but her voice is gone. In the blink of an eye, the shark lunges at the surfer. His board is snapped in two, and he's dragged into the abyss. Once again, Nancy is left completely alone and helpless.
It's 3 p.m. and high tide is only 3 hours away. Nancy uses a broken piece of the surfboard to shield herself from the sun. Her lips are parched and her body is failing her. By 5:56 p.m., with only 26 minutes until the rock is underwater, the shark starts circling tighter, knowing its prey is finally within reach. Even with death staring her in the face, Nancy notices an injured seagull next to her. The bird has a dislocated wing. With gentle hands, she pops the wing back into place. The bird pecks at her in pain, but Nancy just wants it to be able to fly away and survive. Nancy has only one option left: reach the metal signal buoy in the distance. But with the shark patrolling the area, it's a suicide mission. That's when she sees the dead surfer's helmet floating nearby. It still has the action camera attached. Nancy decides to record a final message so someone will know what happened to her. She uses her stopwatch to time the shark's patrol. It takes exactly 32 seconds for it to circle from the whale carcass back to the rock. That means Nancy has a 32-second window to dive in and grab that camera. Nancy finds her opening and dives. She struggles to reach the camera, getting stung by fire coral on her first attempt and having to retreat, but she doesn't quit. On her second try, she grabs the helmet. Just as the shark lunges, it gets poked by the sharp fire coral, giving Nancy a second to scramble back onto the rock. She notices a shark tooth embedded in the helmet and keeps it as a weapon. Looking at the footage on the camera, she finally understands why this shark is so aggressive. It has a massive fishing hook stuck in its mouth, making it hate humans even more. To the shark, this isn't just a hunt, it's a war for its territory. High tide is minutes away. Nancy records her final goodbye on the camera. She apologizes to her dad for dropping out of med school and promises that if she makes it, she's coming home. She tosses the helmet toward the shore, hoping someone finds it. Then she places the injured seagull on a piece of floating debris so it has a chance to live. As the tide rises, the rock disappears under the waves. When Nancy dives in, she finds herself surrounded by hundreds of stinging jellyfish. She knows sharks usually avoid them, so she takes the risk and swims right through the middle of the swarm. The shark tries to follow but gets disoriented by the stings, giving Nancy enough time to climb onto the metal buoy. Once on the buoy, Nancy realizes one of the support chains is loose. The shark slams into the buoy from below, trying to knock her off. Nancy finds an emergency kit inside a life box on the buoy. It has a flare gun. She sees a ship in the distance and fires a flare, but it misses. The ship doesn't see her. Nancy refuses to give up. She's losing blood fast, and infection is setting in. With her last flare, she fires directly at the oil slick leaking from the whale carcass. The water erupts in flames, but even that doesn't stop the shark. Pissed off and more aggressive than ever, the shark starts shredding the buoy. Its jaws are so powerful, it starts snapping the heavy iron chains. Nancy knows the buoy is going to sink. She ties her leash to a massive, heavy section of the anchor chain. As the shark makes a final charge to pull the buoy down, Nancy releases the chain. The weight of the anchor, combined with the shark's momentum, drags it straight to the bottom. Unable to stop, the shark slams into the jagged rebar of the underwater pylon. The sharp metal rods impale the predator, finally ending its reign of terror. Nancy loses consciousness underwater, but the helmet washed ashore, and a young boy found it, leading his father to rescue her. When Nancy is pulled onto the sand, she's shocked to see the same kind man who gave her a ride earlier is the one saving her life. She looks over and sees the seagull sitting on the beach, having survived just like she did. In that moment, she feels like her mother is looking down on her, smiling. 1 year later, Nancy is back on the waves, surfing again. The massive scar on her leg isn't a reminder of trauma, it's a badge of courage. Life will try to break you, but if you don't give up, you win. This incredible movie is The Shallows, released in 2016. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to hit the like button and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more high-octane movie breakdowns. Thanks for watching.